Welcome back, everyone. Our next presenter is First Graphene Ltd. It trades on the OTC pink sheets under the symbol FGPHF and on the ASX under the symbol FGR, and is the leading supplier of high-performing graphene products with a robust manufacturing platform based on captive supply of high-purity raw materials and established 100-ton-a-year graphene production capacity. Please welcome its CEO and Managing Director, Michael Bell. And attendees, submit all your questions for First Graphene through this webinar module now. Welcome, Michael.
Good morning. How are you?
Good evening to you in Singapore. We look forward to your presentation whenever you're ready, Michael.
Thanks so much for the opportunity to present again. I'll break this up into sort of two blocks. Obviously, run through the presentation a bit on First Graphene, what we're up to these days, our growth strategy moving forward, and what's exciting around green tech, which is something we're investing heavily into. And then I'll open it up for questions. So the start of the presentation, so I will open with a question. So what does concrete and plastics, supercapacitors, rubbers and composites all have in common? And the answer is graphene. Over the last few years since the discovery of graphene, it has the impact on it as an additive has been shown to have great effects or great positive effects on various materials, including composites and rubbers. And that is becoming very interesting as people try and make their products more high performing and solve problems that they've previously been unable to solve. For instance, rubbers and elastomers show great improvement in things like tensile strength, elongation, abrasion resistance by very small additions of graphene into them. Other materials such as composites, plastics also show great strength improvement and resistance to wear when you add it in. Graphene is an allotrope of carbon. It is one of the thinnest materials ever isolated and is up to 300 times stronger than what steel is. It's also the most conductive material, far outstrips copper. For an example, how that applies to the real world is if you add very, very small quantities of graphene into the cement process, which is responsible for about 8% of the world's CO2 emissions, it reduces the overall carbon dioxide that is produced during the cement manufacturing process for the same product by about 30%. And naturally, that's very topical at the time, at the present time, given our need to reduce our overall carbon footprint. As I mentioned, it has a number of interesting properties, and when you add it as a material additive, you can transfer these attributes of graphene into your materials and products. For instance, you can use it for lightweighting, you can use it for an increase in flexural strength, you can use it to be both thermally and electrically conductive. It is natural corrosion resistance and fire retardancy. It is hydrophobic, so it's resistant to water, and it has exceptionally good wear and durability tendencies when it's put into these products. A bit on First Graphene. First Graphene, as mentioned, is an ASX listed company. We are one of the world's leading producers of graphene with an annual capacity of about 100 tonne, and that factory is based in Western Australia in Henderson. We are a Tier 1 partner of the Graphene Engineering and Innovation Centre based out of Manchester University, and through that we've managed to obtain new substance registration throughout the United Kingdom and Europe and Australia, and we're currently expanding into the US. We're an active membership of the ISO Standards Committee for graphene, so basically the body that is now regulating the material. We have a market cap of just over 100 million Australian, and our share price is typically around the 20 to 25 cent mark. Our business is in producing high-performing, very high-quality, and what I would call a reliable specification product. We produce 100 tonne, we have capacity for 100 tonne today, and that factory is built and operational. And we develop IP to commercialise graphene in a very broad range of materials and applications which span a multitude of industries. One of the very exciting things about graphene is that it touches on and helps such a broad industry range. There is no one application or material that it works on. It is very, very broad, so there's no dependency on being successful in one area. We have a good de-risking in that sense. In terms of our outlook, with our production process and capacity banked, we now just straight focus on revenue generation and the commercialisation of graphene. We have a very structured market segment focus supported by industry experts that drive us with the knowledge of industry and how to market our products into it. And it's what we refer to as a market maker strategy. This is a new material, so it's not a business of trying to sell something cheaper or differently to the product. It is essentially creating that market. We aim to accelerate the global adoption of graphene through what we develop in-house and with our third-party formulators. And those formulators and partners are from both industrial and academic collaborations. We see a lot of success in proving the science out and then as quickly as possible identifying industrial partners that can move us towards a solution in any one material area. We build on our existing early adopter client successes. So we're one of the few graphene companies that have commercial products on shelves, which I'll elaborate on shortly. And we try and build on that to apply it to new industries and new applications. We also leverage our proven experience and superior graphene knowledge from our successes to build a market-leading materials company, which is our goal. Overall, in terms of our business and how it's structured, we use Sri Lankan high-purity vein graphite in a chemical exfoliation process to make our graphene that is then finished by standard industrial finishing techniques. That is producing sort of a base product that is what we refer to as pure graph. That's our brand. And that typically comes in a powder format, which ranges between 5 micron up to 50 micron. Then we work with third-party formulators and partners, external and internal, and across the industrial and academic to create solutions for problems and to ease the dispersion of our products into additional materials. We have the ability to move across our value stream, both from a powder format all the way through to finished products. And our output is graphitic materials, graphitic material product differentiators. So that covers our powder products, our aqua dispersions, and moving into master batches, liquid admixtures, cement grinding aids, inks and coatings. And this continues to expand both as a completed product, but also as a material that can be used easily in existing manufacturing processes. Our core markets are split into 5 different segments. The first one being rubbers and elastomers. And at the top of that block, you'll see on the left-hand side is a bucket wheel reclaimer, which is used in the mining industry. And that is basically a PU rubber that is hot cast. And with the addition of graphene into that, we've managed to extend the life cycle of that 6-fold. So obviously in a mining application, that is significant because it basically moderates or extends your usable life cycle and subsequently reduces your downtime to replace them. So that's been a really exciting area for us to move into. And then beside those is a safety boot through the company Steel Blue in Australia. We now use graphene in their soles for grip and improved wear. Now, in the rubbers and elastomers spacing, we are very active in that mining space as the nature of high wear or high abrasion applications is very frequent. Things like chutes, skids, conveyor belts, wear liners are all very, very common and in high demand to get that abrasion resistance improved. Our second block, second focus is cement and concrete industry, and I'll talk further on this in a minute, but this essentially offers our largest single opportunity with the sheer volume of concrete being produced and the mathematics or the numbers around the CO2 emissions. Graphene has a lot to offer the cement and concrete industry. On composites and plastics, again, our early adopter clients include swimming pool manufacturers, where they've used graphene to strengthen and lighten GRP ground pools. And it also, being hydrophobic, stops the moisture ingress into the GRP and subsequently extends the life of those pools. We've also used it in GRP boats, which is for the same reasons, that moisture ingress and strength. And we're now moving into things like thermoset plastics in making solar thermal tiles for roofs, house roofs, and then enables to transfer heat by means of graphene in thermoset plastics through water or air medium to either heat your house or heat your water. So that segment is rapidly expanding. There is applications for this in things like wind farms where you've got leading edge abrasion resistance problems, or radar signature and trying to accurately see where wind farms are through radar. And these are problems that graphene can solve. The fourth segment is coatings and inks. So this covers both textiles, paints, general coatings, and it ranges from things like anti-static coatings, where you're protecting pipework from EMI shielding, active antennas, printable conductive circuitry, and then right through to potting compounds that offer thermal relief to electronics and anti-corrosion coatings. So very, very broad segment. And lastly, we have our energy storage segment, which is focused more on the research side, where we are researching ways to create graphene and also graphitic materials for battery anodes, and also the production of green hydrogen, and then into supercapacitors and using a hybrid graphene material to enhance the energy density and power ratings of supercapacitors. And again, I'll talk further on that in a minute. Moving on to our green tech. So with respect to cement and concrete, this, as I mentioned, is probably our largest single opportunity. The amount of cement produced and subsequently concrete in the world, it offers the potentially largest demand point. So our addressable market for this is something like 420,000 tonnes per annum of graphene. So it's well above what we can supply. But that essentially gives you a sort of magnitude of the addressable market. So globally, cement and concrete is one of the largest producers of CO2 emissions. So 900 kilos of CO2 is emitted for every tonne of cement that is produced. And that creates about 8% of the global man-made emissions. So if we think about it as 4.2 billion tonnes of cement in 2020, it's a significant contribution. That mainly comes from the clinker production calcination process, where you're burning limestone and materials to create clinker. When you add pure graph, you essentially can maintain the same performance of cement, but using a lower clinker factor. So by using 10 to 20% less clinker, you can maintain the same strength in concrete, or cement, I should say, and essentially that ripples through for a 10 to 20% reduction or even greater of CO2 emissions. So again, it's very topical for the time and something that we are now starting to see adoption in the cement and concrete companies wanting to be mindful of their CO2 footprint. So again, our biggest segment and probably the most exciting, just due to the sort of trends in the world today. Further in green tech, as I mentioned, in energy storage, we have in the process of developing different ways to make graphene, as we continue to do. We have developed a process which takes a petroleum feedstock and through hydrodynamic cavitation, so that's basically an aerating process that doesn't involve any burning of hydrocarbons, we can produce graphene as a first product, and as a second product, graphite, which is very, very high purity because of the nature of the cavitation process, and it also produces green hydrogen. It's a scalable process using fairly standard equipment, and it sets a pathway to enable oil and gas companies to pivot away from their core oil and unenvironmentally friendly energy production into the renewable space, i.e. making battery anodes and green hydrogen. So it is essentially a pivot point into renewable. We have received patents for this out of the US office, and we're still just have patents pending for the rest of the world. We are actively seeking industry partners at this point in time to take that forward. Our next steps being to build a pilot scale plant that we can essentially move around oil refineries and run that as a process to develop a business case and subsequent joint venture for the production of graphitic materials and green hydrogen. Next on the green tech side is our supercapacitors. So as the current supercapacitors are limited by using essentially activated carbon, and what we've been doing is developing hybrid materials using graphene that the intent is to have a very high energy storage capacity and high power density. Those can be fast recharging and are designed to work alongside lithium batteries or lithium-like batteries. Now, where this is interesting is that if you look at the power demands on a market such as electric vehicles, where you have the need for fast current availability to accelerate vehicles, and then lithium-type constant voltage draw from the lithium batteries, they make a very, very nice partnership. So we have a worldwide exclusive license to use the technology, which has come from University of Manchester and Warwick Manufacturing Group. And we continue to develop that along with the electrolyte that goes with it. And our expectations or sort of early testing is indicating that we should be able to increase the capacity performance of these supercapacitors by something like 2 to 3 times the current market availability. So that's something very, very exciting for us. In terms of our route to market, we have, over the last 6 to 10 months, been recruiting industry experts that can guide us through these markets. Obviously, knowing how to make graphene is only one of the very sort of first small steps in making a viable business. And what we've needed is the guidance from industry of how we get this new material into the various channels. So we have spent, as I said, 6 to 10 months trying to find these people, which we have now done. And we have people heading up each one of our market segments, including composites and plastics, cement and concrete, rubbers and elastomers, and coatings and inks. And we continue to look for an energy storage representation. These people bring a lot of experience, sort of 20 to 30 years of experience in each segment on both a science level as well as a BD and sales. They bring expertise about how you get new materials into the industry, how you distribute them, the routes to market, and the type of formulations and products that are required to make it easy to disseminate into those industries. So we've now got that. That's one less thing we have to focus on, and it's now head down generating revenue and commercialization. Our executive team is split between myself, my CFO, Letitia Astana, and Paul Ladislas looks after our R&D and science. And we're supported by our board. So on a science level, Dr. Andy Goodwin is our scientific advisor and is a real pillar of knowledge in this industry, has been involved in graphene for a long time, and is hugely knowledgeable in the applications that it works in and how we navigate that. So between Paul and Andy, we have a really strong science team. Michael Quinnett looks after our legal representation or guidance on our board. Very, very well experienced on ASX and ASIC companies in Australia. And Warwick Gregor is our non-exec chairman and offers some really solid counsel and experience around the mining and graphene industry, which is hugely valuable. In terms of our investment highlights, we look at, we evaluate our company in terms of our key differentiator points. The first one is our capacity. So our capacity to produce graphene in 100 tonne, and it is producing by definition graphene, which is often not the case for people claiming graphene. We produce the by definition graphene less than 10 atoms thick, and we make it in commercial quantities up to about 100 tonne. The facility we have is replicatable very cheaply, and it is driven essentially by cheap renewable energy. That's the main sort of bill or line item on our bill of materials. And that capacity is scalable as and when required, easily and quickly. Second, we have a very, very high quality product, and we have a broad product diversity. We are not just a graphene manufacturer. We offer graphene master batches, coatings and inks, and all the way through to admixtures. And that product line continues to expand. Our growth strategy, it's now in place, and it's stressed as a market maker strategy. We're not trying to sell a product into an existing market on a better or cheaper principle. We are creating a new market, and our way through that is to focus on 5 market segments with industry partners and industry experts to really start and ramp that growth curve, which we're starting to see. Our global ESG story is really, really strong. Our value proposition to a lot of these problems are based around either a green or renewable type story. For instance, the concrete and cement space, we have that ability to influence concrete to dramatically reduce the CO2 footprint by 20%. So that is, that's fundamental to our story and the value in the product. And overall opportunity, with these building blocks in place, we purely focus on driving this through to commercial success and driving demand and adoption of graphene. So it allows us, because we've got the building blocks in place, it allows us to really tightly focus on that demand generation. Now that covers my presentation. I'd like to open it up for questions now, please.
Thank you for that. All right, Michael, we do have some questions for you. Tony Vega wants to know, when can we expect that Firestop when that Firestop hits the market?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Firestop was, just for those that don't know, was a product developed in conjunction with Adelaide University as a graphene enhanced Firestop. It's not a completed product as such. Our next steps with Firestop is really to find the right coatings company that wants to develop into a product. So instead of just having as a straight coating in itself, the idea is to get the graphene into other materials as the fire retardant. We continue to look for those partners. It's a slow process, but that is heading in the right direction. There is interested parties in it, and it's a case of balancing the cost of graphene to the bulk coatings market.
Thank you for that. Quincy P wants you to talk about your largest customers. Who are they, and how do you plan to acquire more of them?
So at the moment, our early adopter clients are based around, as I mentioned, swimming pools, shoes, mining wear liners, and they are really a drop in the bucket. They're essentially a revenue stream that creates a base for us to build off. They're proven applications. We know graphene works. We know how to disperse it and be successful in those spaces. But they're also not industries that offer the massive tonnage that we're chasing. That comes from the items, so the industries like cement. The addressable market for us in the cement space is 420,000 tonnes globally of graphene. And that's when you talk about it as a very, very small percentage, so 0.01% by weight that goes into a cement as a grinding aid. So that's the sort of magnitude we chase. And our strategy on those is to start from the top down. We're partnering with chemical companies in the cement space that can essentially take our products, immerse it in through it as a grinding aid into the production of their cement, and then through their distribution channels sell the product. So we don't tackle the retail market. It's definitely through sort of the top-down approach through the chemical companies. We have other companies that are looking at for instance, solar thermal. Those tiles, that's a potentially growing business from a tonne through to probably in excess of 250 tonne annually, just in the use of those solar thermal tiles. So we're again taking that industry approach. We're trying to partner with clients that are committed to the process of validating. Being a new material, you can't just give somebody a bag of graphene and say, here, go and try it. You need to hold their hand. You need to develop applications with them. And the trick or the key to it is to find a client that is committed to that process to validate, understand the science, understand the data, validate and trial it and get to a point where they buy it. It is not a short process. It is a 12-month process to go through that, but it really starts to cement in your core clients, and that's what we are doing at present.
Thank you for that. Brian Diaz wants you to talk more about your agreement for HDPE enhancement. How is this going to benefit you financially over the next fiscal year or two?
That's a good question, Matt. So HDPE and using it, you putting graphene into it is something that's come about through the marine industry, where you make plastic or HDPE boats, and they are heavily abraded. They have impact where they can get damaged easily, and that has come about by a partner of ours or an existing client of ours wanting to make boats out of HDPE. And so when we started looking at it, we started to look around what sort of size sheeting you could produce, and that's what led us to the collaboration partner DSP in Malaysia, is their capability and range of HDPE sheets that they could produce. And we've now collaborated also in that agreement with DSP. We've also got Hubron in the UK, which is a specialist master batcher that can take our graphene and turn it into a master batch that you can then extrude into the HDPE sheets. So it is really sort of focused in that marine space initially, but the potential for it in any abrasion resistance or fire retardancy in that sort of wear linings is really interesting to us. In terms of timelines, we are hoping to have results of all that testing and it finalized as a product within the next 3 to 6 months. And we would then be selling into that marine client and other clients thereafter.
Great, thank you. Tom H wants to know, he says you have a US OTC listing, but your news does not show up there. Can you look into this? And he wants to suggest adding like a business wire or a global news wire to your news distribution platform. Thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. We should be doing that. We have an investor relations partner in the US that should be doing that. So I will definitely follow up and ensure that is happening.
Joseph Chu asks what your burn rate of funds is per month.
So one thing that we've focused on over the last 6 months is really resetting our burn rate, and that has come down dramatically. We have essentially reviewed the way our production was functioning and resourced, and the need to grow our commercial team, actually have people actively selling. And so over the last 6 months, our burn rate in terms of our people cost has come down by about 2 or 3 people. And we've also reset our support mechanisms to really sort of reference our current revenue. So that's in a much healthier place now. On the cash that we have, we probably have a runway of about 2 years. And so that has a burn rate of well under $500,000 a month, well under. So we're sort of just progressing that down as time goes on.
Great, thank you. Last question for our time allotment. Jason Huff wants you to hash out your sales strategy a bit. It sounds interesting. Can you go over the mechanics of your sales strategy?
Yeah, so I'll use the cement and concrete segment as an example because it's probably the easiest to explain. So historically, when we developed a powdered graphene, our thoughts were to take it to concrete companies and give it to them as a bag of grey powder and say, mix this in with your concrete. That is essentially how it was done to prove the science in universities. Now, when a client goes and mixes it in, they don't disperse the powder through the concrete very well, and it subsequently doesn't actually get any benefits. And so when we started identifying industry experts to join our business and start driving that, our cement and concrete commercial manager, Todd McGurgan, he came in and basically looked at the way we were doing things and said, well, hang on a minute, the way to disperse it is not in a barrel of concrete, it's to go well up the chain, back to the chemical companies and look at it as a grinding aid for a start, and then as a liquid admixture thereafter that makes it easy to dispense and you get a success far easier. That sort of knowledge was not in-house. We didn't have that sort of industry knowledge to attack the market the correct way. So that was sort of a bit of a pilot in establishing industry experts. And so that's what we've started doing. We've started getting those industry experts that can guide us in the best way to get a new material into their respective industries. And that is proving really successful. That's opened a lot of doors. As I said before, the next step in that is finding the committed client, the one that wants to put the hard yards and that wants to put the science into it, or help us prove the science and get to that production status. And those two attributes or processes go hand in hand, are proving to be very successful, and that's the way we will take it forward.
Great, thank you. One last question, and you can close with this, Michael. Trevor M wants to know, how does your product compare to the quality and price of other products on the market? Last question.
It's another good question, actually. and this is probably the best way to answer it. We are very proud of our product. We believe it is probably the best graphene in commercial quantities on the planet. It is, by definition, graphene, so that means that it has a carbon layer, carbon atom count of under 10 atoms in thickness. Now, we control it by Six Sigma processes, etc., very tightly controlled. So the bag of graphene you get today is exactly the same as what you'll get in 6 months' time. We have a client stream or an inquiry stream that is people using graphene today saying, I can't get a consistent quality of graphene from my current supplier, can you help? And people try ours, they see that it is a repeatable specification. On top of that, ours is a very, very pristine product. And in recent tests that we've done for those clients have found that the amount of our graphene they have to use to get the same comparable performance is a fraction of their current supplier. So they use a lot less of ours to get the same results, and they get the same product every month. And that is becoming really important for those people that are relying on the science behind graphene to make their product differentiators, to make them perform better. So that is very much a validation that we're doing things right. But at the same time, we also acknowledge that very, very high pristine graphene is not the solution to every problem. Sometimes problems can be resolved or solved using a lower quality graphene. So, you know, we stand by our high performance, high quality graphene, but we do acknowledge that it's often not the product that people need to solve their problems. So we have a balanced perspective on that. In terms of cost, we are cost competitive for the standard or for the quality of the product that you're getting. Again, I reference, you know, client situations where they're using 1/10 of their existing graphene supplier. They're using ours. It ends up being a cheaper commercial bill of materials for them because they use so much less to get the same result. So we have a fairly good handle on where our costing setting sits, and that is very competitive.
Great. Well, thank you. Great answer. Great presentation, Michael. We have a few more questions for you. We'll send to you so you can answer on your own time. And we thank you for your time with us today on this conference.
That's great. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to the next time.
All right. Okay, everyone, we have about a 10-minute break. So grab some coffee or some water, some notes, and we'll be right back in about 10 minutes.